Welcome to White Pill Radio, the roughly every other episode version of Theology on Air, which is an outgrowth of Theology by the Pint, which is a ministry in Houston where we gather around craft beer every month and we talk about interesting philosophical, moral, theological, even political, social issues around craft beer. I may have already said about craft
so
beer,
much beer,
but we really want to emphasize that because it's always really good beer. But anyway, check us out at theologybythepint.com. But this particular...
Well, actually, they're both there. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, it's all right.
Or com.
Theologybythepint.org or theologybythepint.com. We want to repeat it many times, so if that was your way of getting me to do that, you did a good job. Anyway, this particular version of the podcast, White Pill Radio, is to look at Christian news and world events from a Christian point of view. This is post-apologetic, ultimately hopeful, applied theology. We are going to do all of that in this one episode.
Yes.
I don't know if y'all know that or not. And I like to say that this is blessed talk, but not happy talk. So we have like 8 articles we're going to try to get to in somewhere around an hour. We'll see if we can do it.
We can do it.
I don't know, but I'm Evan McClanahan. I'm the pastor at First Lutheran. I guess I'm on the leadership team of Theology by the Pint as well.
You don't guess. You are.
Okay.
You are, in fact, on the leadership
But joined by the grand poobah herself today, Sarah Stone.
Hey, guys. Sarah. I'm the executive director of Theology by the Pint.
And great to have you.
Over here on the left, Cody Pogue. I'm a community college professor here in the Houston area. It's been a little while. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah.
Well, good to have you. Well, we have a lot to talk about, so we're just going to jump right in, but theologybythepint.org.
Definitely go check it out. And also .com. I'm so sorry.
No,
that makes for bad radio, but yeah. So I don't know if you guys know what's been happening in the news, many things, but right now one of the most pressing things is the wildfires that are raging in the Los Angeles area in California. Awful. And there have been several deaths, and I think we'll find out more once they are able to like uncover people. But at first they were saying they didn't really know the cause. I mean, obviously the Santa Ana winds aren't helping, but now it looks like at least a couple of these, whatever it was, 10 fires that have now exploded into this whole big conflagration were some kind of arson, which is awful. I know. And people are reeling and they're trying to figure out, like, why does this happen in California? Why is this happening now? And one of the really devastating pieces of information is that some of the fire hydrants are empty. So when they go to pull water, there's no water. And of course, then people get into, well, where's the water? Why isn't there water available? So now there's kind of a political bent to the conversation because you have conservatives saying, well, the reason why there's no water there is because they redirected so much of their fresh water that they have the capacity for environmental concerns. And actually, Donald Trump talked about this on the Joe Rogan show about protecting the Delta smelt, I think. Some sort of smelt. Anyway.
That's a fish, right?
Yes, it's a fish.
Cool.
Yeah. And to do that, they've just redirected millions of gallons of water into the ocean rather than into the more southern parts of California. So that's one sort of political perspective. And the other thing that's been getting a lot of noise in with the pundits is that California has put such an emphasis on DEI hiring in the fire department that they don't have, given California's predilection, that's the right word, right?
Yep.
To fires, you would think that they would be building this strong force of firefighters, but, and they have some, but there's also been a lot of DEI hiring and not hiring people that are willing because they are, say, white men or something. Adam Carolla has come out talking about this, but the article that I have is it was so ridiculous. It stopped me in my tracks when I was listening to this on a podcast. It's about one of these assistant fire chiefs. This is pretty high up. Los Angeles Fire Department Chief Christine Larson. This was an ad they found of her. She's in the LGBTQ world. I don't know her variety, but she's a bigger woman. And so in some interview, somebody had asked her, if you go to attend to a fire, could you help, say, my husband if he were in there? And her remark in there that they used in marketing was, if I have to carry him out of the fire, he's in the wrong place. Did you hear this?
No, I didn't hear that.
That's what she said. And they used it as like an ad campaign for the fire department. And it's this, it was so shocking. I listened to it twice to make sure I heard it the right way. Yeah. So she's saying I'm not responsible when it comes to responsibility. I want to have the job, and I got the job probably in part because of being part of the LGBTQ community. But I'm not going to go in and rescue people. That's their fault. And when I heard that, I thought, this is like when a woman is raped and there's some jerk that comes along and says, well, what was she wearing? Or what message was she sending? Was she being too flirty? And we all sort of recoil at that, and we think like, you shouldn't have raped her, no matter what.
Certainly.
You know, and this is kind of that same thing. Like, you're blaming the dude for being home asleep when a fire starts in his house. It's gross.
Yeah.
I don't have a white pill. I just wanted to say how gross it is. I mean, I do have a white pill, which is take responsibility. And we should have people that are in the fire department that can carry someone out.
But generally it's not the assistant fire chief that's out there putting out the fire, right? Usually they're like at a desk somewhere if you're the chief, right?
I don't know. All of the fictional shows I watch on Netflix say otherwise, Cody. So.
Yeah, I'm not in the fire industry. I have no idea. Just usually the person in charge.
But you could probably carry someone out of a burning building.
I like to think so.
I like to think so too.
And hopefully the people on the front lines will. But I will give you that, we should be hiring the most qualified people for the job, right? And I don't know anything about their background. Who knows? This person might be the most qualified person, or they might not. I don't know.
But I will take issue with that, because even if this person, if she could carry someone out, this attitude makes her unqualified.
Right.
I don't want someone that's in the rescue industry that is unwilling to rescue.
But isn't that like the Republican thing? Is people need to take responsibility for their own actions?
Oh my gosh, for being in the wrong place. Okay.
No, that's not what I think. He probably does.
Oh my gosh.
No, well, broadly speaking, yes, I believe in personal responsibility, but also believe that there are times when people are actual victims. And the one thing, we talked about the hurricanes last fall. And it's like, if there's one thing the government should be doing, it's helping people in an emergency. That's kind of what we pay taxes for.
Yeah.
And what's been interesting after that disaster, but that was in a Republican state. And now that you have this happening in a really blue state with a, highly, probable candidate for the presidency in 2028 as the governor there, Gavin Newsom. Sorry, that was...
Stop! Oh my gosh.
That's how Trump says it. Sorry. Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom. That just slipped. But anyway, like... This is a referendum basically on like their leadership, and whether we like it or not, when there's a disaster, whoever's at the top gets blamed. Okay, if Bush is going to get blamed for Katrina, then all these people face the same recriminations. And I think though that in terms of the DEI, a lot of people are saying that the mayor, Karen Bass is the mayor of Los Angeles.
Oh, she's the worst.
And the county itself is a lot bigger than, it's kind of like Harris County and Houston, except Houston would be much smaller in that example. So Los Angeles County is huge, and she's only the mayor of LA, but she lost to a highly qualified guy named Rick Caruso, who's like a billionaire, super philanthropist, but he's a self-made developer, and he built a lot of stuff in the Palisades, for example. And so he knows LA inside and out. He basically ran as a Democrat, but because they have ranked choice voting, I think anyway, there was no chance he could win as a Republican, but everyone knows he's pretty much a wink wink and a nod nod a Republican. But he lost. And Karen Bass is a black woman with some fairly radical ties in the background. She was in Ghana, even though this was a red alert. Santa Ana winds are coming. Any spark can create this problem. They don't clear out the brush. This is what Trump talks about. He's like, they're not cleaning out the brush. Wildfires are going to happen. It's only a matter of time. And so, she looks really bad. And again, it's like, well, yes, but we need to hire a black woman. And I think there's going to be a lot of rethinking that. I think even some celebrities now, a lot of whom have lost homes, are coming out now. By the way, Mel Gibson was on Joe Rogan while his home was burning down. And he had a great attitude. He's like, well, I guess I don't have to worry about those pesky plumbing problems anymore.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, well, I'm unburdened by all the stuff.
And he said something like, I think it was him, it may have been Adam Carolla, that said something like, wait until these people have to file for a permit to get their home rebuilt, and they see all the regulatory red tape.
Scott Adams of Dilbert fame, he made a list, and other people have made similar lists where they're going, okay, building materials cost so much in California, the house literally costs more than it's worth when it's done. So you're already underwater. There's so much red tape. The buildings, there's not going to be nearly enough builders. They're talking about decades. Decades. And there are other people, even on the right, by the way, who are lamenting the loss of some architectural masterpieces. When we went to California a few years ago, we went to the Gamble House, which is Doc Brown's house in Back to the Future.
Oh, fun.
At least the exterior. But it was built by two brothers, the Green brothers. And absolute masterpiece of craftsman architecture, and there's lots of that in California, lots of that in this area, and a lot of those homes are just gone. Now, I don't think the Gamble home burned down in Pasadena, but I think a number of architectural landmark pieces did. Also, if you've ever watched Inception by Christopher Nolan, Cobb's home is a green home.
Oh, interesting.
Anyway, So it's really quite tragic. The way that these people seem so flippant about their responsibilities to keep water tanks full, to make sure the land has water, to put out fires, to clean out brush. It just seems like another example where no one seems to be responsible. It's just, well, stuff happens, and the insurance companies pulled out, so a lot of these people aren't even insured. It's a total mess, and I think that what we are seeing, I think I've said this before, but we are seeing, in so many ways, the collapse of complex systems. If you look at our airline travel, if you look at food, if you look at supply chains, that's a lot of what COVID exposed. You go to a restaurant, you feel lucky if you get the right order and you have good service and stuff, the things we used to take for granted. Anybody been in a car wreck lately? I was in a little fender bender maybe 5 years ago. It took 3 months to get a part. 3 months. So I think there's actually just like the kind of basic know-how to get stuff done in big cities and states and countries is just, and that's why Trump got elected, I think. I think basically they look at him as a guy who can get stuff done, and we're tired of this feeble incompetence that you see across the board. And when you give priority to people because of their skin color or their sexual preference, I think there's going to be a lot of people that are like, you know what? I'm done. I don't care. I'm just done. Not doing it anymore.
Yeah. And I do think there are some industries where you're going to have more men than women. This gets into sort of the women's sports conversation too. And I'm okay with that. And that doesn't make me not a feminist or anything like that.
So you think there should be more men than women in women's sports? Or?
No.
Okay. I was making
I
sure I
think
understood right.
women only and women.
Exactly.
This does remind me of the fraternities saving the American flag. Like when the Hamas guys were on the college protests at the end of the spring semester last year. It's a similar vibe where it's like, you know what? We need the men back. Like we need the guys who will take charge, got some alpha energy, and like say, not on my watch.
Well, yeah, like if someone breaks into my
important.
house, I want to see a hunky cop coming. Or if my house is on fire, I want to see some. I think the theme here is that I need them to be hunky. I'm joking, but men that I know could carry out my daughter, could carry, really help. And not to say women can't. There's some women that can, and they should be hired if they're capable. And that's that's the final word on it. If they can do it, they should be hired.
Yeah, they should have the same tests that anybody else should have.
Oh, that's a big issue. Who was it that talked about that the other day? Maybe it was Matt Walsh, but he talked about there was a firefighter test and how the standards have to keep going lower and lower to to let certain numbers of people in. Yeah. I can't remember if that was in California or what, but it was remarkable. Did y'all see the video that went around the other day? This was a DoorDash driver, I think, or a Pizza Hut. I don't remember which, maybe both. Who went into not related to these fires, went into a house totally on fire and rescued kids. And the kids were like, there's someone else in there. This was maybe a week ago. Don Trump Jr. retweeted it. Lots of people retweeted it. It's worth seeing. This was a guy who's just a pizza delivery guy. Yep. Like goes in, risks his life and saves people. And this was right after Biden gave like George Soros and all these other people Medal of Freedoms or whatever they were. And there were people who were like, okay, this is the guy you give the Medal of Freedom to, or Daniel Penny.
Hired to be a firefighter in Los Angeles County.
So anyway, I thought those were interesting.
But I do still think that like people who like change art and cinema and all that kind of stuff, there should be some kind of celebration of that sort of thing as well. As well as the person who rescues the children. They're both important.
Oh, you mean like with the Medal of Freedom? Is that what they were, Medal of Freedom? I can't remember. Like there's the highest civilian and the highest military, and I might be confusing them. So if so, I apologize. But Trump gave Rush Limbaugh a Medal of Freedom, for example. So Denzel Washington got one, and Training Day is one of my favorite films, I think. But I haven't seen Gladiator 2 yet, so I don't know if he's good in that.
He's afraid he's going to cry. All right, shall we move on?
Yeah. I thought this was fascinating because this is like right in our wheelhouse when you talk about kind of like worldview and the impossibility of escaping worldview, the impossibility of neutrality. That's right in my apologetics wheelhouse. But this was a story from Fox News, or actually Yahoo, or both. I don't know. Richard Dawkins leaves Atheist Foundation after it unpublishes article saying gender is based on biology. Famed biologist Richard Dawkins resigned from the board of prominent U.S. atheist organization last week after it censored an article arguing that gender is tied to biology. British outlet The Telegraph reported Monday that the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the founder of which and president of which has debated in my church across the way, and he said the most vile, blasphemous things you could ever imagine about God. But
was that Ronnie Reagan or
no? Dan Barker.
Okay,
yeah, Dan Barker. Anyway, I won't go into that. But anyway, the Freedom from Religion Foundation put up those billboards a few years ago, like God probably doesn't exist, so sleep in on Sunday. Remember
Okay,
that?
yeah.
They're in Houston here. Anyway, British outlet The Telegraph, Freedom from Religion Foundation pulled the article, Biology is Not Bigotry, from its site following backlash from pro-trans individuals. Dawkins resigned. In his resignation letter to the foundation, he called the removal of the piece an act of unseemly panic and accused the foundation of having caved into hysterical squeals from predictable quarters and retrospectively censored that excellent rebuttal. Now, if you don't know who Richard Dawkins is, he wrote the huge bestseller, The God Delusion. He was one of the 4 quote-unquote horsemen of the new atheist movement back in, the mid-2000s, kind of a post-9/11 response to religion in general. Sam Harris, his career's taken a beating. Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens is dead, and Daniel Dennett, who's a philosopher. They've all kind of fallen on hard times, but I mean, at one point, Richard Dawkins was in the zeitgeist as a very prominent atheist, as a biologist, because he also wrote books about he's kind of has some famous quotes about DNA. We all dance to the tune of DNA. We're just meat machines is more or less, what he believes. He obviously defends evolution and all of that. But so what's interesting is that on the atheist side, though, they are unwilling to say what, say, a traditional Christian would say about sex, which is that if you're born a male with male parts, you're a male. That you don't get to choose your gender. Pardon my use of the words, right? But you don't get to choose your gender late in life. It's not something that's sort of debatable. It is what it is. And as a biologist, an evolutionary biologist of all people, you're kind of committed to believing in that as a core reality. So when an atheist group takes a stance on something that seems to be pretty set in the science, because of outside pressure, now even the atheists are saying, in other words, they affirm
don't
that,
be silly.
Yeah, they affirm the transgender, understanding of things, and so he's saying no, this has gone too far. And here's my bottom line: atheists have a worldview. Okay, atheists have a point of view. They have doctrines that they defend. This idea that they're just sort of out there floating around like, well, we don't believe in
Neutral,
anything.
yeah.
Who knows? And there's, we're all neutral in these questions. No, like they're going to the mat on this transgender question. And they're on the side of those who favor the idea that you can choose your gender. And so, and they also like to, claim the mantle of we're just science. Just science, just the facts, just the DNA, just the because that's all that you're left with. If you have no transcendence, if you have no physical understanding of the nature of the reality or the world, or your very self or the conscience or anything like that, you're just left with matter.
Material. Yeah.
It's just material. So, and yet they're rejecting that in essence by embracing transgenderism. They're saying, no, there is an overarching thing to this whole thing called matter. So I think it actually is interesting in the way it exposes the way that they are also susceptible to the very things they claim that we're susceptible to, like the witch trials, right? Panic and movements and trends and
emotion-driven,
yes, all of that. And so I think that's what it exposes. I think Dawkins was right to leave it for whatever that's worth. He's becoming sort of more conservative by the day, as it turns out. And so that's where we are. So
Do you think he'll ever be a Christian?
Yeah, we had this conversation in White Pill Radio. I think that sort of thing is fanciful. Christopher Hitchens, went to his, he died here.
He
in
was my
Houston.
favorite of the 4 horsemen, by the way.
Well, he's super smart and a great writer
and funny.
Very funny. Defender of the Iraq War, which we'll maybe get back to later. But because we have that article about the Taliban. But anyway, I know the Taliban is in Afghanistan. But anyway, no, I don't think so. I mean, I'm of course I hope so. I think anything is possible. If Romans 1 is true in that we all know the truth of God and we suppress the truth in unrighteousness, then the longer we do that, we're essentially, it's like
hardening. Yeah.
It's a hardening. And I think it becomes more difficult and you have more capital invested. And, young people are still malleable. Seitan Bruggencate, who's like a street level presuppositional apologist, he says, look, I can go to a college campus and I can talk to them. Some yell and scream, but I mean, I can talk to a lot of them. They're interested in what I have to say. But all the 50 and 60-year-old atheists I meet, if I go to a conference and hold up signs and things, they yell at me, they curse me. Their heart is like totally hard, So it's like holding down the beach ball, suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. The longer you do it, like kind of the harder it gets. So you have to like double up on your efforts to keep that truth denied.
Were you going to say something?
Oh yeah, I was gonna. I don't know enough about this guy to really talk about him. But going back to the trans issue, I always want to put it out there that I think y'all sometimes present what a lot of us on the left believe a little bit, different than how we actually do. I think most of us accept that biology is biology, right? You're born male, you're born female, but gender is looking at some kind of cultural component, right? Like, I don't think any of us would deny that there are some people who don't feel like they fit in with their biological sex. So science is a tool that has to ask, why?
Yeah.
Why is this person different? And I think what we've come up with is gender as a cultural word. And that's just a word we made up. We can call it something different if we don't have to call it gender. Yeah. We can call it whatever. But a lot of us have chosen gender as the word to explain where somebody puts themselves as opposed to biological sex.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where we're at. Most of us would agree that you're born male or female.
Hey guys. Sarah Stone here. Sorry to interrupt what I'm sure is a riveting podcast episode, but Theology by the Pint needs your help to continue providing these podcasts, offering our in-person events, and growing so we can bring thoughtful conversation and the hope of the gospel to a world that's increasingly walking away from church and from faith. Now that we're a 501c3 nonprofit, all donations are tax deductible, so we've crunched the numbers, and if each listener of this episode gave just $1 for each episode you listen to, we'd put a huge dent in our annual budget. So consider giving today. Go to theologybythePint.org/give and click the link to donate. Thanks so much, and now back to our show.
But we've got this other term to describe people who think they fit outside of that binary.
I've tried not to use the word gender recently, and I'm not necessarily mad at the word. I think I agree with everything that you said. And I think maybe it's even helpful to have a word that's like, hey, what's the expression of who you are? And because we talk about like gender norms, right? Like women, cook and take care of children, and men fight fires or whatever.
Right.
And obviously some people bend those, like there are women firefighters, there's men that stay home with the kids. So I'm not mad about that. I think my problem comes with when you take gender and then you want to, in some sense, actually equate it. So not what you're saying to sex by saying, I'm gonna manipulate my body and my hormones to match what I believe my gender is, rather than what biology says my sex is.
Yeah. And I would say somebody should have the freedom in the United States of America to do that, right? Yeah. And I'm still going to be kind to them because that's who I am. I'm a nice person, right? I think where a lot of our disagreements come in is like when it comes to the, like schools and bathrooms and that sort of thing. Yeah. But certainly for grown people, I think we can all agree that they should have that right in the United States of America. So.
Yeah, that's an interesting discussion. That's more about sort of how libertarian are you? And I think I tend to agree with you, but then I hear stories of people saying like, well, I felt like I didn't have this leg and I got it amputated, or I felt like I should be blind and so I blinded myself. And you think like, at some point, should not someone step in and say like, please let us help you?
But that's sounding like a liberal. Once again, personal responsibility. That's what y'all believe. So.
I know. Maybe I'm a little bit of a liberal that I want the government to step in some cases.
I actually think that Christians could make a better case for something like transgenderism, if you will, than atheists. Because we at least have a spiritual component. I think you could at least make an argument that
immaterial,
that being made in the image of God, that God is not male nor female. Right. So, you could have a kind of, you could have a different identity or something like that. I would reject that, obviously, but I think you can, but an atheist I don't think has that luxury. I mean, atheists have a very constricted worldview. It's materialism and that's it.
Yeah.
You have nothing else. Now, if you want to claim you're agnostic and you don't know, and you can go off into la la land and believe whatever you want, maybe, but an atheist, no, it's a material matter, the facts, science, and so I think that's a problem that he kind of faces, but cool. Well, and pardon me for getting up in the middle, then I'm still adjusting sound levels. This is why we need a producer who does this while we're doing it.
If you want to do a job for beer and hugs as pay, and you like producing, we'll put you in the credits and everything.
Absolutely. Okay, well, you got the next article, Cody.
Oh, yeah. This is just a general article. A great American, Biden honors Jimmy Carter at state funeral. And really, I just kind of chose this as an article because I think it's important that we talk about Jimmy Carter, right? He may not have been the best president, although I think in some ways his reputation as president is coming back a little bit, as I'm seeing people say he's the last president who was honest with us instead of of just telling us what we wanted to hear, right? He's the last president who was like, I'm going to save taxpayer money by walking around with a coat when I'm in the White House because I don't want to make the taxpayers pay for me to be comfortable. But
That'd be a very different president.
The Malaise speech, I actually think there's a whole interesting conversation there to be had. Have you ever watched it?
The what speech?
The Malaise speech, so-called. It's where he's sitting in the White House and he's wearing a cardigan. And he's basically like, yeah, well, we need to use less energy. I mean, that whole debate kind of comes down to, do we go create more electricity? This was also at the time when they believed in peak oil. So like 1984 was the year that we would start to run out of oil, And so there was literal concerns about like, stop using so many natural, fossil
resources,
fuels. We're going to run out of them. And he was clearly in that camp, whereas there were others who were like, we just need to keep drilling. So you have the environmental protection idea. You've got, consumption and conservatism. But he basically was like, keep the thermostat on 66 in the winter, and wear a sweater, And in the summer, keep it on 82 and wear shorts.
Yeah, he put solar panels on the White House, right?
Really?
Now the Chinese are ahead of us when it comes to solar and that sort of thing. What if we had invested in that, not just from an environmental standpoint, but from an energy standpoint? Like we could be leading the world economically in this, but we kind of gave up that ground by relying on the old technology. But either way, what I really want to talk about is this idea that character matters, right? Being a decent human person, being a person with virtue. And I think that's something that it's hard to take away from Jimmy Carter that I wish we had more in politics today. Regardless of political side, I think we can learn from how he lived his life, especially from his post-presidency.
Yeah, over the holidays, something came up about his name, and my mom, who's a conservative through and through, and probably doesn't think he was a very good president in that role, said something like, but he was just such a good man.
Yeah.
Something like he was really unimpeachable. Like he was moral and
an openly confessing, Christian.
Right.
I mean, I think if you go by kind of president by president after that, I mean, nobody really believes that when Bill Clinton walked around with his big Bible, he meant it.
Yeah.
Bush claims to be a born again Christian, having dealt with alcoholism. I don't think Obama and his connection to Reverend, Jeremiah Wright really rung true for a lot of people. At best, that was a kind of, liberation theology, understanding Christianity that I think skirts the limits of orthodoxy. I'm not going to defend Trump on those grounds. Who am I leaving out? Biden, I mean, he's abortion supporting Catholic. So I really think you kind of have to go back to Carter as like the most evangelically, Nixon was a Quaker.
Right.
Interesting. And he had this kind of weird thing where he definitely did some immoral things. But he kind of like never wanted to be, he had a potty mouth, but like, even when like he did all these recordings, like they kind of got him impeached. Like he wanted the transcript to take out all the times he said like GD and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
He was an interesting guy, but anyway, I'll give him credit for that. Carter for sure. And actually I don't mind the like cardigan thing. Like I actually agree with that. Right. Like that's how I operate the church. I mean, in fact, I've been scolded a few times, like, run the sprinkler system more, okay? The grass is dying, and I'm like, I'm just trying to save money. Run the thermostat more. We're all cold here, So I actually relate to that. And
Service at 11 a.m. this Sunday.
Yeah,
bring an extra sweater.
It'll be nice and toasty. But no, I agree. And he was a nuclear like physicist or something. He was extremely smart.
Carter
guy.
was?
Yeah.
I just knew he was a peanut farmer.
No, that was like a side family thing. That wasn't like a full-time. No, he was like I don't know if he was on a submarine in the war or worked at a power plant. But no, he was a very, very educated guy.
Yeah. And I also think there's something to it, not to shoot this at Trump, but when he became president, he gave up his business. He didn't hold on to it once he was president. Because, whether you intend to or not, if you're president and you have a big company, people are going to benefit your company in order to try to get to you.
Sure.
And he understood that and, let go of it. So.
That's interesting.
Would you support, there's a bill that someone in Florida come to me, representative in Florida. He's a pilot that goes and rescues people. Anyway, Corey Mills, would you support his bill that says no individual stock trading?
100%. Yeah, I think if you are an elected official, if you're in Congress, that should be your paycheck. I guess maybe have a blind trust that somebody else runs, but that should be your paycheck. maybe controversial. I would say even for the state of Texas, we have this problem. We pay our legislators $7,200 a year, and we're sticking it to the man. But I would say let's pay them a fair wage and make it to where they don't have any paycheck outside of that, because
it's less manipulable.
Yeah, I mean, like, how many legislators are there in Texas who they have no background in the oil and gas industry? They get elected, and suddenly they're the vice president of an oil company making millions of dollars. Like, really? Did you get that on your merits? No, you're getting paid off. I think if you're working for the taxpayers at that level, that's where your paycheck should come from.
I like that. Am I a Democrat? I think this is the episode where I shift. And one last thing about the funeral, you noted.
Yeah, I just wanted to note, I saw this today, that Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood sang the song Imagine by John Lennon. And might be a catchy tune, but it's like, imagine there's no heaven, no hell, no religion too. I mean, it's totally a nihilistic song. I mean, I guess it's like the end point of communism, where like we've all like been reduced to the sameness, and there's no rich or poor or difference. And so it's kind of a, literally imagining a utopian vision. But to do that in true communist fashion, you have to get rid of religious differences. You have to get rid of exclusive claims. So it was bizarre that someone as religious as Jimmy Carter was, he asked for this song.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he asked for Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood to sing it. And
I mean, the Garth Brooks Trisha Yearwood thing kind of checks out. That's very Americana, but because they're country.
Of course, they also like divorced their spouses to be with each other.
Well, I think he was thinking about the,
Yeah. I'm just
genre, but I'm shocked about that.
I was surprised too. That's why I mentioned it, because it was like, so I don't know. I guess there's a sentiment in the song that is mildly defensible in terms of longing for peace or something, but it's basically amateur hour when it comes to philosophy. It's like, it's a joke. It's an absolute joke in terms of, the sentiments expressed.
Well, and if you're a believer, there is no hope for peace if there's no religion, if there's no God.
Right.
So, yeah.
Speaking of God.
Yes. People that believe in a different God that has really strict rules. You guys may remember a few years ago where we left Afghanistan in really one of the worst sort of military operations of all time. And the Taliban rose very quickly to power. And they've been oppressing women ever since. I mean, among other terrible things. But I mean, really, really, really oppressing women. It's so bad. So this article, I noticed this a couple weeks ago. Taliban ban windows to stop women being seen inside homes. This is a couple of lines from the article. It says, the Taliban have banned windows in residential buildings, so homes, to stop women from being seen while they're at home in Afghanistan. Hibatullah Ahudzada, the leader of the Taliban, I'm sure I don't think
that's how you pronounce that, Sarah.
Okay, let me stop.
Okay.
Ordered that buildings should not have windows looking into places where a woman could be sitting or standing, so her home. The decree posted by government spokesperson, I'm not going to try to say all these names, somebody else, states that new buildings should not have windows where you can, quote, see the courtyard, kitchen, neighbor's well, and other places usually used by women, AFP reports. Seeing women working in kitchens, in courtyards, or collecting water from wells can lead to obscene acts. Decoded, can lead to men taking advantage of them and raping them. So just, that's what they mean.
Well, that goes back to your blame the victim sort of thing, right?
Yes.
Where the women were dressed
they
too
can't be
much,
seen.
and the men couldn't help themselves.
I mean,
so they have to cover every inch of their body. They have to go inside,
and then also not be seen.
Right.
But by the way, guarantee if they find out that behind these closed walls they're not wearing their burqas, they'll still get beaten. The decree stipulates that in properties with windows that do not fit the new guidelines, owners will be urged to either construct a wall or block the view to, quote, avoid nuisances caused to neighbors. What a nuisance, seeing a person. And the last line I'll read says, women in Taliban-ruled Afghanistan are currently prohibited from going to a salon, working out at the gym, even speaking or praying in public. They also are prohibited from getting an education beyond 6th grade education. And now there was another, a link in here that non-government organizations are no longer allowed to employ them. So they can't work outside the home. They can't pray outside the home. They can't do anything outside the home. So they'll be in the home, but now they won't be seen. And by the way, it's not just that they won't be seen, it's that they won't see.
Yeah, sure.
Like, as I was reading this, I was thinking, my cat gets treated better than these.
Yeah.
Like, I sometimes will open the windows so our cat can see outside and like watch the squirrels because I love him and I want him to like see what's out there. It's so gross the way that they treat these women. And the more they do this, the more that everybody in that culture sees women the way they want them to, as things, as objects to be owned and to make babies and make your food. And that's it, not as people. And I don't have much of a white pill other than to say, when you hear people talk about how, oppressive Christianity is to women, I think, have you paid attention? Now, I realize this does not represent all of Islam. And I did some research before coming in today about what does the Quran actually say about this kind of thing. And I think Sharia law has taken some of the Quranic verses that talk about Muhammad's wives, and they've taken that to say, okay, for every woman. But like, why not? I mean, I actually don't think that's so crazy a thing to do. If you're like, if these were the respected, revered women in the history of this religion, why would we not all pattern ourselves after that? And there is a verse, I put my computer away, so I think it's 33, that's easy to remember, that talks about the women not leaving the home. And so then they've taken that and they've, broadened it to all women. Obviously the Taliban are evil. Obviously it's bad, but this comes from an ideology that does set it in motion. If you want to be part of a religion where women are respected, revered, are pulled into the, like walking alongside the very savior figure, it's Christianity, I mean, there's so many amazing women in the Bible. We don't have time to get into it now, but you should come talk to me if you want to hear more about it. They're highlighted as the trajectory of the Bible goes forward, as Jesus comes on the scene. They're part of his ministry. They're loved. They're cared for. They're protected. Anyway, so I guess my only white pill is don't be a Muslim, be a Christian.
Well,
So a little bit of a different standpoint on this. I see this as the danger of putting religion in charge of government, right?
I thought this might come
if
up.
we don't separate the two, I think this is the danger. And let's say that we were to put Christianity in charge, right? The danger I would see is eventually you have some power-hungry person who may not even be a Christian,
right?
But he goes out and announces that God is on his side.
Yeah.
And now you have this messed up Christianity that's all about power for this person who's in charge. And I mean, you can find a verse in the Bible for anything. Slaves, obey your masters. Women should remain silent in church, right? And I just think that that's really the danger we have when we mix government and religion. It pollutes government and it pollutes religion too.
Yeah. I
I
with
disagree.
some nuance, I actually agree with you with some nuance.
I had to say I disagree before you said that. No, I think if that were the case, I think we would have seen it by now.
Would have seen what?
We would have seen women treated this way in Christian circles, like where.
But Christians aren't in charge of government like Sharia law is.
They have been.
But Christian law hasn't been or sort of biblical law hasn't been the law of the land. It may have been run by Christians.
Like even Puritans, though, who were strict theonomists and did abide by biblical Old Testament law, or at least strove to in many cases, and tried to apply it. The Westminster Confession, the general equity theonomic principles, they were, even abiding by those. They didn't say to women to cover their face,
Right.
Maybe cover their hair,
Yeah.
but the Bible does say that too.
But you had witch trials, inquisitions, all kinds of...
there was the Spanish Inquisition in Europe, and that was more about heresy, and the witch trials were a little out of control. I will grant that. They might have killed a few real witches though during that time. I don't know. But
hot takes, y'all.
But I mean, this is every single woman under the Taliban's rule. This is an entire country. So you just don't see this. I mean, maybe in the Mennonites, the women have to wear skirts, and they probably can't say very much in public. I mean, but that's a pretty niche, possibly even cult version of Christianity. But I would say this, at the very least, this is a reminder that when people say things like, well, all religions are kind of like the same.
Yeah.
Like, let's not be so sophomoric as to say things like that. There are clear differences. And I mean, I would agree. I'm not a theocrat. Actually, I don't think even theonomists who would, bring forward God's law as a cultural norm and standard would be theocrats. But I do think that in government, you're going to have a question. It's just like the Richard Dawkins situation.
Yeah.
Okay. In government, you have to appeal to a transcendental authority. You have to.
Some kind of standard.
Law has to have an objective, metaphysical kind of appeal. I mean, why is it actually wrong to do that thing? You have to have a social contract and covenant and worldview to kind of get there. And so for us, it's Christianity. Now we can throw that off and see where we end up. I think you're actually far likelier to see women treated like this under some version of atheism or socialism, because if all we are is matter, then women are just breeders.
Yeah.
Right. I think to actually have value as a woman, as the weaker sex, the way that you get there is that you're made in the image of God. Christ died for you. It's these kind of, I don't say platitudes in a bad way, but these axioms that Christians defend. So I don't know. I'm not too worried about Christians doing this
taking over
and I guess the coming together point was going back to Jimmy Carter, right? I would say that it would be great if we had a virtuous Christian citizenry that follows those values, but a government that doesn't use religion as the centerpiece of it.
But what would it use? That's kind of my
reasoning, logic. I don't know, utilitarianism.
Well, but Cody, and maybe we need to just give an example of what you were saying, because I gave this a lot of thought last year when we had an event about Christian nationalism. This idea that when a government makes laws, so say the law to not murder, that comes from somewhere. That comes from some kind of, I mean, we all have a basic understanding that's wrong, but where does that come from? It does come from God, because of God's perfection, his standard. We understand that life matters, and so we ought not kill. So I think there's a difference between the law mirroring the standard of perfection that we would say is God. There's a difference between that and Christians taking over as the sole
planting
leaders,
our flag
and then we say everyone else has to be Christian or something. I'm with you on that. So maybe religion isn't the right word to use, but I don't think law is neutral.
But like even the atheists, they depend on, you said, reason, utilitarianism, and they can't even agree on gender.
Right.
So that's my point. It's futile. Like you have to have an outside standard that says this is what sex is, as an example, or this is.
But the Baptist and the Methodist can't agree either.
I know. But you hope that the difference between Baptist and Methodist are non-essential things. They all agree we shouldn't murder. There are some, I mean, I keep saying that because it's such an obvious one.
Right.
But they also agree about what we would call small things, like cutting in line is wrong. There are just some standards about fairness, truth, beauty, goodness, right? These things that do transcend, but they come from somewhere.
Right.
They're not just a neutral thing that's in the air that we're all breathing.
Yeah. And not to undercut my own position, but we don't even agree on murder, because abortion is a pretty clear example that there are Lutherans who do not agree on whether abortion is right or wrong and what it actually is. So,
but if they thought it was murder, then they would agree.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, at least you hope so.
Yeah. Well. Yeah,
that would be a really cool segue for our next article is about abortion, but it's not.
Yeah.
No. Can you segue it to this?
I don't know. But
okay, let's just get into it then.
This gets back to kind of right-left dynamics, worldview. This is from a poll, I guess, that went from 2008 to 2022. This was a Twitter or X article that I linked to. And the question basically is men and women who say extramarital sex is, quote, always wrong. And this is among men ages 18 to 55 and also women ages 18 to 55. Now, I know that you can't see this, and even if you're watching on YouTube, you can't see this chart. So I'm going to kind of have to explain it to you. But the bottom line is that among Republicans, so it's divided among Republicans and Democrats, and then religious frequency, being frequent religious attendance. Thank you. Yeah. Religious attendance frequent, and then nominal or never. Okay, so let's start with the men. So for men in 2008, they went from 95% to 90% in 2022. So a drop in 5% among men who are Republicans and frequent church attenders who said extramarital sex is always wrong. Democrats started that same, again, frequent attender Democrats, 81% in 2008, now it's 78%. So it went down a little less, actually, about 3%. Okay, then Republicans who are nominal or never attend church in 2008, we're at 73% say that extramarital sex is always wrong, and they went up to 76%. So there actually was an increase. There's a kind of a growth in conservative values, you might say, among those who don't or hardly even go to church. But Democrats went from 78%. So interestingly, they were more conservative in 2008, and now they're at 43%.
It's a huge drop in the graph. It's like the thing your eye goes to.
So the huge drop is among not or never attending, rarely or never attending religious services among Democrats, going from 78 to 43%.
And that's Democrat men.
That's men. Now women, it's similar. I don't have numbers on this one. It's going to be harder to see. But bottom line, it's similar. It's a small drop for both for women who basically go to church frequently. So there is a drop, but it's pretty small. There's a slight uptick among women. Republicans who never or rarely go to church, but there's another big drop. So I guess I don't want to pick on anybody, but if you have to,
if I had to,
if there was an issue that we thought was important in the society, something like the ubiquity of extramarital sex or non-marital sex or whatever you want to call it, or promiscuity, if that was a social problem, generally speaking, Democrats, whether they go to church or not, but definitely if they don't or rarely go to church, basically seem to have no problem with it, or fewer of them have a problem with it. Fewer of them say that it's always wrong. So it's one of the, sorry to get into kind of the weeds on the data and such, but generally speaking, what I have observed, and this is how it's communicated in the life of the church. Well, everyone at that church is a Republican, or everyone at that church is a Democrat. You basically find that churches are kind of segregated now by right or left, whatever, with a few people kind of sprinkled in, usually at most congregations. And so the question is always why? And I'm just presenting this as like Exhibit C. I think abortion is a bigger issue, but this is right there. Like if you look at how we think about abortion and other sort of like maybe immigration and other social policies, but this would be right up there with like, what do we think about sex? And like, obviously, in 15 years, our thoughts about sex and when we should have it and with whom we should have it has changed, quite a bit. And this is just a kind of data point to say all that. So
I also wonder if people feel more emboldened to say what they've actually always kind of thought, but because it's become more culturally permissible with the sexual revolution and, the rise of like birth control and abortion and things like that.
Are we going to talk about that anytime soon?
We are.
When?
It's so funny you should ask. Oh my gosh. If you're, I don't know when this is coming out, but it's coming out
Today.
before Tuesday, the 14th. We're doing our next event here in Houston about IVF, birth control, designer babies, reproductive stuff, what you ought to do, what you ought not to do, and we will have all sides represented. So you should come check it out. Everything you need to know, theologybythepint.org.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I wonder if it's part of, it's in the same way that like people on the second round of Trump's campaign felt more comfortable being like, okay, I'm going to vote for him.
Yeah,
Where the first time it was like, oh my gosh, I would never tell people, but I am going to secretly. And I wonder if that same thing is happening here. Like people, 10, 15 years ago would be like, oh yeah, sex outside of marriage is wrong. And now they're like, oh, I can say what I already thought.
Yeah.
Possible. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would, to kind of add on to that, notice it says, say that extramarital sex is wrong. How many people are saying that it's wrong?
Sure.
But still doing it, right?
So many. I can tell you from the dating scene.
Yeah. And so, just to kind of open it up a little bit, I hear people talk sometimes about ethical non-monogamy. So
That's
idea,
people sleeping with people that aren't in their marriage.
right, consensually, like both partners know about it,
Open
right?
marriage stuff.
Yeah. So, on one hand, maybe that's better than cheating and having dishonesty where the other partner doesn't know about it.
Still cheating.
Point better. Sure. I'll give you that.
Well, if we go to the go to the Old Testament of the Bible, they had many wives, right?
Yeah, but it was never God's plan for that to happen. Yes, as someone that has been on the dating scene, you are a crazy person if you say that you're waiting for marriage to have sex. I mean, you're really seen as, and not just on the dating scene, but when you're in that zone of life and you're talking to your girlfriends or groups of people, like people look at you like you have a disease. I mean, it really is, you're a unicorn. Right. Anyway, yeah.
But if you have a disease, then
what better way?
Okay. Also, the prevention is real. Okay, I'm not going to go into that. Okay, but of disease. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. So, okay, tell us about net neutrality. This is you're gonna have to make me
Talk to us like we're fourth graders.
Yeah.
So this is the issue where I'm going to convince y'all all to join my side over here with the liberals.
I think I already did in the pre-conversation.
So basically, what the issue is when you sign on the internet, you pay an internet service provider. Maybe it's AT&T or Comcast or Verizon, whoever gives the internet to you, right? And net neutrality is the idea that everybody should have the same internet and the speed you pay for should be the same speed for every website that you go to. Without net neutrality, the danger is that companies would be able to speed up or slow down certain websites, maybe even block sites. So for example, let's say that you have Comcast. AT&T is their competitor. So they're just going to block all of AT&T's websites. Or Comcast is your provider, but they also have cable that they want you to buy, cable TV. So they're just going to slow down your Netflix real slow so that you're just going to cancel Netflix and get cable TV from them. Basically, it creates a situation where your internet service provider can put pressure on you to buy their products and not be able to even see their competitors' websites. Liberals tend to support net neutrality. We believe everybody should have free, fair internet.
Not free.
I mean, not free, but fair internet. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you still have to pay. Although, anyway, but Republicans, conservatives tend to go the other way. They tend to say that this is government overreach. We should give companies the freedom to run their company as they choose. I argue that companies are very powerful, these multi-million-dollar companies, and by giving companies freedom, we're essentially taking freedom away from us as individuals. And in a situation where you have to choose one or the other, let's give the freedom to the individual and put rules in place that the big, powerful companies have to follow.
I'm in. You convinced me. Before we started recording, I was like, Cody, explain this. And he explained it like he just did. And I was like, well, that sounds good. Like we would all like net neutrality, right? And he goes, not Republicans. I'm like,
right.
What? Yeah, I do like, the corporations being able to do what they want in the free market, but I don't like the sneakiness and the there's nothing you can do about it,
right.
as somebody that's paying for that.
Yeah.
There were, I remember years ago in the kind of heyday of talk radio, there were talks of like enforcing some kind of fair time, equal time on like radio. So
Right.
like, Rush Limbaugh was like dominating the AM radio waves. And so like the liberals tried to have Air America.
Yeah.
Sort of failed and went bankrupt. And there's like Democracy Now!, which is on the old radio station we were on, KPFT, for example, here in town. I don't know why, but liberal radio tends to not compete with the juggernaut that is AM talk radio. And now kind of the podcasting space is sort of taking over all that. So that failed, and that I would oppose. This feels like the Citizens United case all over again, where actually probably conservatives probably agree in principle with a lot of the same ideas, but their concern is that you could have a precedent because the conservatives on the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Citizens United.
What is Citizens United?
So it's a Supreme Court case that basically limits how much money is in politics. Citizens United is a filmmaking company that made
takes
films
the
about
limit
Hillary.
off. Of
Yes. It takes the limits off of like how much corporations and so on and so forth can give. That's how you have PACs bundling,
Yes.
and that's how we have billions of dollars that go into political campaigns.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot that could be talked about there, but like a lot of conservatives now don't like the Citizens United ruling, even if they agree it's probably was technically the right ruling, because in America, you have freedom as an individual, but you also have freedom as a corporation, because a corporation is legally just kind of a group of individuals, and it kind of this is when like Mitt Romney said, corporations are people,
Entities, yeah.
yeah, and so what the case he was making is technically correct, in terms of what they are legally, but the concern is that, well, then you can create corporations that can be money, bundlers and such, and that could bring in a lot of foreign money. I think the Act Blue fraud that clearly took place is a part of this conversation. So I do think, I'll say that I wish there was no money in politics. Like a lot of countries do this where, basically they'll have public forums for candidates. The candidates can campaign, but they can't just raise billions and millions of dollars. Now, I'm not. I say that I'm in favor of that. I can't say that for sure because I don't trust the government would be neutral in the process anymore. I think if you look at the debates that we had this last year, where one candidate is fact checked and one isn't, I don't trust the media, to be fair. So maybe having it a wide open thing is the way to go. I don't know the solution, but this would be another example where, do corporations have the right to do what they want? I think conservatives tend to reflexively want to defend the corporation's right to do that, because if you say no, it's going to ultimately limit your personal freedom. On the other hand, a lot of conservatives are now instinctively against corporations because corporations are for liberal agendas. So these things have kind of a balancing out over time. But
So Evan, did he convince you? Are you for net neutrality? Are you a Democrat now too?
I think maybe on this issue, it's not being very familiar with it. I'd say I'm probably for net neutrality. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you guys, let's hug it out.
Yeah. Okay, I had a couple of last. We'll make these maybe kind of quick. Although the number of stories we're going through is record pace for us.
I know.
I just want to say this is like Indianapolis 500 territory here. This one shocked me. This is kind of an older article. It's over about a month old now from the BBC. Assisted
You have to do the whole
dying-
thing in a British accent.
My accents are terrible. But anyway, hopefully Canada will soon become the 51st state, and we'll make this all go away. But assisted dying now accounts for 1 in 20 Canada deaths. That number shocked me. So let me just read a little bit of the article. Medically assisted dying, also known as voluntary euthanasia, accounted for 4.7% of deaths in Canada in 2023. New government data shows. The country's 5th annual report since euthanasia was legalized in 2016 showed around 15,300 people underwent assisted dying last year after being successful in their applications.
Oh my gosh.
The median age for this group was 77, more than 77. The vast majority, around 96%, had a death deemed reasonably foreseeable due to severe medical conditions such as cancer. I don't. Is this part of our conversation actually on Tuesday? IVF
I mean, if someone, I guess if someone texted in,
I think this could be a whole event, to look at, assisted euthanasia, assisted suicide, all that sort of thing. But I think the reality is that and there have been a lot of stories of people who go in to see their doctor in Canada and they have chronic pain, and it's like, well, have you considered killing yourself? There are people who are like, no, I'm 65 years old and I'm in great health and I want to live another 20 years to see my grandkids. Why is a doctor coming in here being like, well, you're actually a burden on the medical system? Mm-hmm. And this is why conservatives reject socialized medicine, because you don't actually have a relationship with your doctor. The doctor is an apparatchik for the government. And they represent not even the taxpayers, because we have fiat currency, but the doctor really represents the state more than you. And in the way that medicine is supposed to work is the doctor is your advocate. It's just like when you pay a lawyer, he's your advocate. Mm-hmm. He's defending your health, your well of life. And a lot of people in Canada there are anecdotes of people saying, doesn't seem like that. So I wonder if and I think it should be common knowledge that the last year of your life tends to be the most expensive, right? Because there are measures to keep you alive and so on and so forth. I do believe in dying in dignity. I don't think that it's a Christian virtue necessarily to live like forever, to live in a terrible state. I think that if people find themselves in a vegetative state, if they want to die naturally, that's okay. It gets complicated. There are different cases. I was not for Terry Schiavo being starved to death for 2 weeks. When that case came out. But anyway, I think one of the problems that you have, and this is what we're going to see, is that when it's an option, over time, more and more people will take it up.
Yeah.
I don't think it should be an option. I don't believe in euthanasia. I don't believe in assisted suicide. It's still suicide, and suicide is wrong. But this number just absolutely floored me. Now, those people would have died anyway. Perhaps
everyone's going to die.
Everyone's going to die. I meant to say like in the relative.
Come to our events for the hope. Okay, let me stop.
But when you make it convenient for 77-year-olds, how long is it before 70-year-olds? How long before a depressed teenager?
Well, that's already happening.
Yes.
Depressed teenagers.
Yes.
It's not the majority, but it is happening.
Yeah. So anyway, that was shocking to me and concerning, and it's a reason that we should not. It's a classic example of an exception to a rule. So we make the exception. So the person in chronic pain, who's going to die in a couple of weeks anyway, let's make their life easier for those 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden it kind of becomes the rule, and then the standards continue to change.
Which, by the way, a couple thoughts. One, here in America, and I know this from very personal stories of my own life, that they will, when they know that someone is going to die anyway and they're in a lot of pain, they will give them inordinate amounts of pain medicine, which will probably shorten the length of time they have left. Mm-hmm. So it's not like we're not doing that part already. The other thing I want to say is, did either of you see that interview with Jordan Peterson? I can't remember the woman's name. She's a doctor who made the astonishing and horrifying discovery that the medicine that they're using in Canada for this, at least they were before she blew the whistle on this, they realized that the people are basically drowning for hours on end, but they're paralyzed, so they can't scream out in pain. So it's, as she said, sometimes it can take up to 24 hours that they're drowning in their own body, like their lungs. Yeah. Wow. And so what you think you're doing as a kindness, you're actually torturing them for the last hours of their life. I mean,
it's so bizarre how we have like, I don't know, 80,000 fentanyl overdoses a year. And like when we want to kill someone,
we can't do it right.
I mean, I know that sounds incredibly morbid, but it's the same thing with death row.
Yeah, it is.
Like, oh, the medicine didn't work, or the electric chair didn't work.
I thought we were experts on killing ourselves.
Can we?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, if we're gonna do it, just use a bullet already.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's like, why would we torture somebody with like this horribly painful thing? There was that weird story. I don't think we ever covered it, but there was in like Denmark or something. They put you out in the woods in a capsule. And you're out in nature and you see like beautiful birds and things. Anyway, a woman did that, the first one ever. They found her strangled.
What?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Google that. It's a really weird story. So
White Pill Radio, baby.
Yeah,
We're bringing you hope and promise and peace.
I mean, Christianity once again for the win, because we do offer a robust defense of human life from birth until natural death. And again, I do think we can rethink some of the heroic measures we take with the elderly.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think we should have your paperwork in order, your DNRs and all that kind of stuff. You should have a living will and testament and anyway, your orders for your doctors and stuff. And I think when it's time to go, it's time to go. That's fine. We believe in eternal life.
I was going to say the hope of the afterlife really helps in these scenarios.
Yes. But my concern is that it's a slippery slope type situation where you start killing people and boom, you know, the numbers increase and the excuses and the reasons increase as well. So, okay, I had one more article.
I don't really have an opinion on it. I never really thought about it that much. I think your slippery slope argument makes sense. I do have some sympathy for the idea that, if you only have a few little bit of time left to live and you're in pain, that could be an option. I'm a big supporter of freedom, you making your own choices, but y'all make good points too. So if I were to choose a side, this would be very low on my list of issues. So.
Sure.
Yeah. Maybe we shouldn't have an event about it. Nobody would come.
No, they just listen to Cody and be like, both sides are so nice.
Do you remember Dr. Kevorkian?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he was like on the news when we were kids, Anyway. Okay, last one, and I'll try to make it quick because this is a hobby horse for me and I've talked about it already. But it's a story from Yahoo News, or the AP, technically. Abortions are up in the U.S. It's a complicated picture as women turn to pills and travel. So, long story short, the Dobbs decision ended Roe v. Wade, and some states adopted, like Texas and Oklahoma, pretty much bans totally on abortion, at least on paper, but not really.
Right. Because
you can take these pills, mifepristone, up to 12 weeks of your pregnancy to take the life of your child. That's what it is. That's what I would call it. And basically, there's no penalty for the mother, so they can do it with impunity. They can also travel out of state, which is an issue that's going to come up at some point, whether a Texas resident should be charged with killing her 30-week fetus if she goes to California to do so. Legal in California, not legal in Texas. Is the act of a Texas citizen the thing that's wrong?
Right.
Or is it where it takes place? So I think those are issues that are going to end up at the Supreme Court. My only point in this, and actually we had a long conversation on our text thread about this, so I kind of feel like I'm repeating myself, but at the end of the day, when it comes to abortion, you're either an abolitionist or you're for, or I guess obviously allowing it, or you're for regulating it. Those are really your only three options. The pro-life.
Wait, say it again. You're either an abolitionist.
You're an abolitionist. You're in favor of it, or you believe in regulating it. Right. So, like, well, I'm not in favor of abortion, but I think it should only happen 20 weeks, 12 weeks, 15 weeks.
Sure.
Heartbeat. When they can feel pain. Life of the mother, things like that. I wouldn't put life of the mother.
I was going to say,
that's a different category. Yeah. But you get the idea. So, the pro-life community, I would argue, generally wants to regulate abortion. They don't actually want to end it. No, they say they do. They might even use the word abolition. But every time push comes to shove, and the rubber meets the road, most of the pro-life lobbies and state legislatures will always advocate against, say, charging a woman with taking a pill on her own and killing her own child. And even if they go to an abortion clinic and they sort of have everyone dead to rights, say an OBGYN does it in his office, they would go after the OBGYN but never the mother. So there's an argument that that inconsistent application of the law essentially prevents a state from truly being abolitionistic, if you will, if that's a word, in nature. So we say, in states like Texas, there are still abortions going on, even though they're all against the law.
Well, and like the article talks about telehealth, is one of the big things with the pill, because you can be anywhere. You can get a telehealth person that's in another state that can say it's okay for you to get the pill here. Different pill than the pill, but yes, abortion pills.
So I think what's going to happen is we're still going to have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of abortions every year, and I think the pro-life community is going to go, okay, now what? Because I think they won kind of the battle with Dobbs, and they really didn't win hardly anything at all. They maybe got very narrow victories, and that Texas can now put the Planned Parenthood out of business, maybe. Except they've changed their business model to mephistoprone and trans surgeries, or something. This is basically. Eventually, the pro-life community is going to have to come around. And I think if you look at the corollary of slavery, which is how we should view this, it's 1850. You're either pro-slavery because you want them, you're an abolitionist because there should be none, or you are arguing for a middle position, which is regulating it. Well, it's okay to have slaves, but we won't separate families. They won't get beaten with, whips. They can only work, it's like a labor union. They only work 8 hours a day and they get 3 15-minute breaks.
Okay, I would push back a little bit, not in sort of principle, but the people that you're calling regulatory, that sort of middle, the pro-lifers, I don't think it's the same as the regulating slavery, because I think they're taking it one step at a time. It's step one, then step two. Yeah. And I'm not saying it's right or advocating for that, but I am saying I think they think there's political wisdom to, hey, do we have a better chance of protecting all the babies from 20 weeks on than if we just go for, broke and then we get nothing. So I don't think it's quite the same.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't like the slavery one either. But yeah, I would fit in that middle category. I think 20 weeks is a fair time period.
For now or for always?
For always.
Why?
I have fears about what happens if we just make it illegal. If we do away with the supply but keep a massive demand, right? I think that the way we
demand for murder.
For
I'm
abortion.
Be kind of
for abortion. I think people are going, as long as there are people who want to get an abortion, they're going to find a way to do it. And so the solution has to be to minimize the people's desire, which I think we do by having generous welfare programs, WIC programs, CHIP programs that give young mothers light at the end of the tunnel and that say you can do this, right? You're not just gonna be destitute. Yeah. I think we need adequate access to contraception, all those sort of things, all the things that make it to where people, because most people aren't sitting around thinking I want to get an abortion. They end up in some situation they really didn't want to be in. So how can we help people not end up in that situation where they're going to get
so
an
I like
abortion?
A lot of what you said, but I'm so sorry I have to push back.
You're welcome.
So here's the question for you: do you think abortion is murder? I know I'm putting you on the spot on.
Yeah. No, I would say no. Because I would go with the line that murder is when you kill a person, and I'm separating a human from a person, right?
Okay.
A life
so up
from
to
a
20
person.
weeks, you say it's not a person.
Right. Yes.
Okay. Well, at least that's consistent, and
Yes.
makes me cringe a little less at saying if there's always a demand, because if you thought it was murder, which I do, and I think you're wrong, then what you're saying is, and you're not saying this, but it sounded like you were saying, well, there's a demand for murder, so we got to let them. Which we would never say that about any other. If it wasn't babies, if it was like redheads,
right?
Or
well, so if it's somebody at the end of their life and they have the machine keeping them on, they're brain dead. There's no brain waves happening, but their body is still alive. I would argue that it's okay to turn the machine off, because at that point, what made them a person, their soul has gone, right?
Yeah.
Their body is still alive. So turning the machine off, you're not killing a person, but you are killing a life, a human being. So.
There was a medical ethicist interviewed by Tucker Carlson, and I don't like everyone Tucker interviews or anything like that. I'm not advocating for it, but he did interview a medical ethicist, and he talked about brain death and how that's kind of a folly. Now, I agree that at some point people are dead and the plug
Let
should
them
be
go. You already
pulled.
said it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah,
not
can't
always
go
the
back on
case.
that.
It's actually quite complicated as to when people are dead and so on and so forth.
Right.
But
Yeah,
so-
and for me though, there's a little bit of a cost benefit analysis, right? Like if you have, let's say, young girls, 16, 17, even 20, whatever, the girls that get pregnant who will get an abortion, they'll find some way. If we don't have a safe option, then there's going to be a situation where not only are they going to put their life in danger, but the child's still going to die as well.
Sure.
Right. So,
And again, I agree with all of that. And I do think the whole we'll go back to back alley abortions thing is a little bit of a red herring, but let's just say it's not. And I agree with that. Again, the question is it murder or not? Because if you believe that is a person that has all the potential for human life that you and we did when we were at that stage, then it doesn't matter. There's no cost benefit analysis to murder. And to go back, it wasn't a joke. If we change the population, we don't like the slavery metaphor, fine. Let's say we say it's okay to kill someone as long as they're a redhead, a natural redhead. There's not that many of them,
Right.
That sounds ridiculous. And they were like,
Right, of
well,
course.
listen, we'll limit it, but the demand is still there. People really want to kill redheads, so we have to let them somehow. That sounds preposterous to us, but because they're babies, we're like, well, it's fine.
Right. Well, because they don't have brainwaves, because they can't feel pain. I think that makes
definitely
it really
by
different
20
than
weeks,
a redhead.
definitely
right?
by 20 weeks, they have all of that.
I have a feeling the more science catches up, I think we're
Possibly.
going to find out that number's going to go back
Yeah.
and back and back.
Yeah, possibly. And I'd be willing to listen to
Yeah.
the science, right? The best science that I've seen so far says like 23, 24 or something like that weeks. But,
No. They're feeling pain like probably 10 weeks. Not probably actually well before that. I mean, I think heartbeats are around 30 days at most. Some people say 18 days. Now, it's not a fully developed heart with ventricles and aortas,
Right.
but it's, blood beating through a central part of the body that's already there.
Right.
You should look at my fetal models. I'll show you my high dollar fetal models, and you'll see a 12-week fetus is a small human being in every way. Distinct eyes, ears, nose, hands, fingertips, fingernails, arms, legs, the whole thing. It's all there, and that's 12 weeks. So it's definitely there before that. Definitely by 10 weeks. So anyway, abortion
on
is
that. I do push back against some of the rhetoric that I hear in the Democratic Party. I'm much more of a 1990s Bill Clinton on this particular issue. The idea that we need to make abortion safe, rare, and legal.
Yeah.
that's basically the Republican position now.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
And that's kind of where I stand is I'm not, pro-abortion. I want to decrease the number of abortion. I just don't want this big unintended consequence that I think would happen.
And I hear the compassion in your posture there, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Where can people find you, Cody?
I'm on TikTok, Cody Pogue, CODYPOGUE. Go follow me. As long as it's still up, I'll be on there.
Cool.
Well, if we have net neutrality, everyone should be able to get.
You should be good. You're good.
And you can find me and Evan at our upcoming event on January 14th, or find our pictures and our bios, little stories about us on theologybythepint.org.
And I'm Evan. I'm at First Lutheran, flhouston.org. So thanks for listening. Thank you guys for being here today.
Absolutely.
Braving the cold here in Houston. And until next time, we encourage you to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed.